Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Dan Moulthrop, Chief Executive here, also a proud member. And it's my pleasure to introduce our panel today to discuss the issue of concussions in youth, amateur, and professional sports. While risk of concussion is elevated in any contact sport, the words football and concussion have become deeply linked in recent years. Nearly every week in the NFL, a player suffers a head injury. The PBS program Frontline reports that there were 199 NFL concussions in the 2015 season. The long-term health effects of repeated concussions and other head injuries include memory loss, depression, and chronic traumatic encephalopathy, also known as CTE, a disease which has been linked to the suicides of several former NFL players. Despite these statistics and these facts, the issue of concussions in the NFL has been plagued by controversy. In 2009, NFL leaders were called before Congress to explain why they had failed to acknowledge the dangers of concussions suffered by their own players. Much of the controversy regarding concussions, CTE, and the NFL is chronicled in Game Brain, the landmark 2009 article in GQ, which was expanded into the movie, and dramatized in the movie Concussion, which opened in theaters last month. Americans are becoming increasingly aware of the dangerous side effects of concussions, and not just for professional football players. So what does this mean for the future of sports? And in the meantime, how do we keep players safe? Our panel today should provide some insight. Here to lead our conversation is Training for Life founder and author Steve Sanders. After playing 5 seasons in the NFL, 2 with our very own Browns, Mr. Sanders went on to serve as a professional life coach and motivational speaker working with youth, high school, and college athletes. He also partnered with the USA Football and the NFL's Heads Up Football Concussion Prevention Initiative. And with that, Steve, I turn the program over to you to introduce our other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're honored to be here today. Thank you to the City Club for having us. It's truly an honor to be here on this stage today. To my left, I have Mr. Josh Cribbs, who needs no introduction. But do we have any Josh Cribbs fans in the building? Any Josh Cribbs, right? All-time great, Cleveland Browns. We have Josh's wife next to us, Miss Maria Cribbs. And then far left, we have Dr. Mayor Pandya, a sports psychiatry. So we're just gonna have a conversation. You guys have seen the movie Concussion. Mm-hmm. What's your overall perspective of the movie?
I'll take it the first one, but looking at the movie, it truly had me scared of what's to come. While I'm on the football field, I'm fearless. I have no fear. It's like playing recess. The hits that I take, the hits that I've taken, I know it's a part of the game. I feel like not everyone can play the sport. It's not meant for everyone. If you're scared, stay home. That's kind of the motto, how it's been. Looking at the movie and just staying to that question, looking at that movie, I almost had to turn away a lot. Oh, that's not true. It's like I'm in disbelief, of playing this great sport that I love so much. I'm like, it's not real. I'm kind of psyching myself out, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I was scared. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It almost brought tears to my eyes. I'm like, wow, because seeing some of those hits that they showed on the movie was nothing compared to the hits that I've taken. Mm-hmm. And if they're experiencing things, I'm scared for my future.
Yeah, that's good. Maria, what about you?
Just hearing him out the bat say he was scared. I've never heard my husband say he was scared before, so I'm over here about to be in tears. But I kept asking him, like, let's go see the movie. You want to go see the movie? Let's go see Concussion.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
He wanted to see everything but Concussion. And finally we went to go see it. And, normally when we come out of a movie, we're talking about, what we thought about, if it was good or bad. It was crickets as we were walking to the car. And I know it probably, touched him a little bit. And when he just said, him thinking of what's to come, sometimes I think about that, but then it's, how we all, ultimately we're going to end up, dying of whether old age or some type of sickness. And I hate to feel like he feels like something is to come, because something might not happen to him. So it kind of just, mm-hmm. jerks me when you say that a little bit. But, I thought the movie was decent. I mean, the hits were a lot harder than what was in the movie, but it was just weird having everybody call me like, did you see concussion? They want to get my take on it, and I don't know. I just don't want to receive that type of prophecy over my life. But
That's good.
yeah.
That's good.
I would agree with what Maria said just right at the very end there. Is I think that it's thought provoking and it stimulates discussion. I think it really created awareness of a topic that was sort of being discussed already, sort of within circles, and promoting things like this, where we can sit down and talk in a larger forum. I wish that there was a little bit more education included in the movie about kind of the background and the science and kind of where things were at. I think that was a little bit of kind of what I sort of missed as part of the, I mean, it's a Hollywood movie, so you expect there to be a lot more drama and romance and those things, but I think that kind of took away to the seriousness of certain parts of it that really would have been, I think, good.
Yeah. So we hear this term CTE thrown around a lot. Can you tell us what is CTE?
So maybe I'll start with concussion and then kind of talk about how that relates to CTE. So concussion, as I think most people know or at least familiar with, is an acute sort of brain injury that occurs as a result of some sort of hit or blow or force that almost literally shakes the brain. And that shaking sort of stuns the brain and creates a whole wide array of clinical symptoms. Most commonly, these can be headaches, dizziness, insomnia, confusion. And in most cases, the concussion usually resolves within a short period of time, 7 to 10 days if there's appropriate management and assessment. CTE is a related condition that's chronic, as the name sort of suggests, but it's been associated with, I guess, 3 elements, some of which are still debatable. One, there is a history of trauma in the person's past. 2, there is a very distinct or specific look to the brain or an injury to the brain when it's examined, usually at autopsy. And then the third is a non-specific sort of spectrum of clinical problems, dementia, mood problems, behavioral problems. I think scientifically there's agreement that people who have been diagnosed with CTE or those that have been labeled as having CTE have a history of trauma and have that characteristic finding on their, at autopsy. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the question and debate about CTE is more about if or how or even to what extent the clinical behaviors that occur years or decades later relate back to the history of trauma and what you actually see on the brain. That correlation is, I think, still not quite there.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for sharing. Now, Josh, most recently, just 2 days ago, there was an article that came out on ESPN.com. Randall L., great return man, former Pittsburgh Steeler, right?
Yeah.
But Randall L. said that he regrets playing football. As an 11-year veteran who's played this game at the highest level, do you have any regrets from playing the game?
Honestly, I have to say no. Playing football has brought some of the greatest joy to my life. In the aspect of the adrenaline rush of being out there, the camaraderie, the friendships. Mainly, in youth growing up, mostly all my friends or anybody who was in my circle played some type of sport. I flooded my life with sports and not just football. But, I read the article and I understand his pain. I mean, I complained to my wife more than anything. Even while I was playing, getting out of the bed, feeling like I'm stepping on pins and needles. It's been times when, when I left the Browns and I was with Oakland for a short period of time. We went through a difficult process because, I wasn't healed yet. I had knee surgery and just from all the hits, and I just was uneasy, groggy all the time, and, moody, and just, uneasy. I had fluid in my knees and it hurt. I need medication for this. And every time I would come back from practice, it was, just trying to walk right without medication and needing medication to do anything. Mm-hmm. This past year, being with the Colts, on the off days, not being able to run around with my son, having to, pretend jog, like, I got you, and kind of throwing my, and just seeing him run because I didn't have my medication. I didn't, I wasn't at work, and I didn't get that fix, and that's what I regret. But I don't regret the sport because, it just the hope that it brings, and the gladiator sport. I was raised, and I think, it may be wrong to raise, men in a sport to where it's looked at, how hard you can hit the other guy. That's like that's how good you are as a player.
Yeah.
We used to, in rec ball and going up, even in high school, if your helmet didn't have a lot of contact on it, we say, oh, you ducking that rec. Oh, you ain't, if you don't have a lot of head trauma or head, marks from other teams, that means you were sorry or soft.
Yeah. Then show how good you were as a
exactly.
player.
It showed how good you were, the hits that you could take, the hits that you can get up from. I prided myself in not getting hit, but getting up from the hits.
That's good.
So I don't regret it at all.
Yeah.
I just wish that, like I was having this conversation with a doctor. The research was more advanced to whereas we could see signs, and that the doctors can say, hey, we see that you're on this path from your brain signs. We need to give you this, or you need to stop doing this. I wish it wasn't a shot in the dark, like, oh, you had how many concussions? Chances are, you're going to have, I wish it wasn't such the unknown.
Yeah. Maria, I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, I am too. I normally don't talk.
Yeah, exactly. I had to force her to come. But you bring an interesting perspective, because not only are you the wife of a former NFL player, but you're also the mother of a 6-year-old boy who's watched his dad play football since he was born.
Right.
And now wants to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah.
Do you have any reservations?
Of course I do. I honestly, my son is 6 years old, and I honestly think he just realized Josh was a football player last year. And so, he's watching him play with the Colts, and sometimes when, he's getting on my nerves, I'm like, well, look at Daddy on YouTube. And so he starts picking up, somehow he Googles his name, and then he sees all the hits he's going through. And those hits, when I see stuff like that, it just does something to me. So I'm like, I wish there was a way to block this off of YouTube so he could just see all good, plays. But now he's getting to the point where, last year when he was 5, he kept asking me, Mom, you going to sign me up for football? You going to sign me up for football? And I'm like, oh, heck no, I'm not signing him up for football.
Did everything she could.
Yeah, I put him in t-ball, I put him in basketball, and I thought he was, active enough. And we get in the car, and he would still, okay, Mom, did you sign me up for flag yet? And I just couldn't avoid it. And so I started thinking, as a mother, I want to protect him because, it's one thing to see a husband out there getting beat up, but oh my God, he didn't do the dishes. He deserved that. No. But then for your baby to be out there on the field one day and taking hits, I don't think I could handle that. So a part of me wanted to stop him and put him in something that, was a little bit more a safer sport, which I don't know if there is any, because apparently football isn't the only one you can get concussions in. But then another part of me is, who am I to stop his passion or something that he's passionate about, So that's what I struggle with. Do I let him go out there and take that risk, or do I just let him do what he's passionate to do? Who am I to stop him? Why live in fear of something that could happen, or that's what I fight. That's what I battle with.
It's a good perspective from a mom, protective mom.
Maria, just want to follow up. So you said flag football. You also have
he's
the
in
same?
flag now, but now he's talking to him.
Yeah,
not even flag, but that's safer. I've seen it. He's done a season of it, and it was good. But now he's trying to work on his dad about tackle. So I hear them having a conversation about it, and I know if he wins him over, then he's like, okay, then he comes over to me. So tackle is the next step, and that's
sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, even
So
about the coach.
we do good at putting them off. I was telling Steve, I said, it starts next year. And I said that in the fall when it started. I'm like, it starts next year because you're only 6. And he's asking now. I said, football's in the
smarter
fall.
now,
I was like, it's bad. He was like, but you said it last time. Man.
He's like, now I'm 6. We're like, we can't.
I really, to help Maria on that, I'm trying to, keep him out of contact at least until, getting ready to go to high school at that level. And hopefully he has gained enough fundamentals and doesn't have the passion to actually hit and to, because at a young age, that was my passion. If I could hit somebody and had his contact, I go back and show my friends, like, man, where y'all contact at? And I don't want him to go down the same path, because the hitting, the trauma starts at a young age.
Yeah. And with the education now that we have, at what point in time do we have these conversations with our young kids in contact sports about the dangers that are out there? Mayor, you have a son who plays flag currently, right?
No.
He doesn't.
No.
You're not letting him play?
Well, he did, but he was not something he was really even interested in. He went, and he was more interested in just kind of socializing. But I think
Did you sign him up, or he wanted to get signed up?
He didn't even want to.
His friends.
Oh, okay.
His
were doing
friends.
it, and he wanted to do it for the social piece. So that was, which I still think there's a lot of value in that. I think there's I think you were saying there's camaraderie, there's teamwork, there's problem solving. There's a lot of really sort of important things. But as far as when to have the discussion, I think it's individualized. I think it depends on the child and the age and kind of what it is that you kind of see for that child. I don't think it's any different than talking to your child about drugs or drinking or the things that you're concerned about. I mean, you have to have a serious discussion at some point. If you're really concerned about them playing football or contact sports, then I think you find the right time when you think they're mature enough to have that kind of discussion.
There's another perspective to this too as well, from the mental health side of things. You work with athletes. Give us some reasons why athletes don't report concussions when they do have them.
I mean, I can speculate, but Josh can probably tell you, and you could probably say. But
Yeah.
I think that from a mental health standpoint, I think there's a lot of reasons that people don't engage in treatment. I think one is stigma. I think culturally there's still a lot of stigma, and I think it's even more intense within professional sports. I think there's mistrust a lot of times about who can you trust within the team or the organization or the coaches, because there's always the worry about your own security, right? And I think access is probably the third thing. I think having easy, personalized, kind of immediate access when you feel like you're depressed or you have a problem is not always the easiest thing to, within a professional team, there's always a medical doc walking around, there's always an orthopedic guy, but is there a mental health provider easily available that fits into your schedule and your lifestyle and easy enough to access?
Yeah.
I definitely have to answer. I have several stories on why players and athletes do not report it. One is the peer pressure. We don't want to stay in the training room. You don't want to be injury prone.
Can't make the club in the tub.
You can't make the club in the tub, and it's a stigma, and it's just something that is known. It's a part of that male dominance and who is the alpha male. If you stand in the ice tub, if your coach sees you always in a training room, it's that sort of softness, So I think the education will have to come from the coaches as well. It'll have to come from the top down to look at, this is not a bad thing if they're trying to get healthy and stay healthy so they can stay on the football field. But then it's an aspect of they looking at it as you're hurt all the time. You have concussion. Oh, he got a concussion. That means he'll be out a couple weeks. We need to get somebody else who has a tougher chin, so to speak. Boxers, his chin is not tough enough. You take a hit, he goes down. So they're looking for the guy who can take a hit. Another reason is contracts. Even this past year, I've never had a split in my contract. What a split is that if you're not playing on game day, your contract gets cut in half. Everything that you make, you might make $1 million this year, but if you're not active, it gets cut in half, essentially. So you're playing for your families and you're playing for the paycheck, and you weighing those options. I've weighed those options. I've chosen the money. And anybody in this room, it's hard for you not to choose when you have $1 million salary as opposed to a $500,000 salary for a game or for a couple games. So when you see guys, you know, not reporting, I've done this all the time. I've been hit so many times, and doctors approach me so many times. I know the questions that's going to be asked. I know them like the back of my hand. I know that they're going to come ask me what team we're playing, what day of the week is it, and I'll tell you this, and this is the truth. I'll tell you this, and it's, I probably shouldn't say.
We talked about this. Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, this past season, I got hit so hard against Denver, and last year against when I was with the Colts, and they brought me to the sideline. What team we playing? And for the life of me, I couldn't remember. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. You know, everything was rushing in my head. I'm trying to convince them. So, you know, they're like, Josh, what team we're playing? They're on the knee, and the doctors are all looking at me in the eyes, and I'm like, I need a distraction. So I look up at the Jumbotron, I say, oh man, oh my gosh, and then they all look. And then I look and see what team we're playing. And I'm like, oh. So I noticed we're playing Denver, so I'm like, oh yeah, that's Denver. And they look at me, and I was like, what was the question you just asked? They was like, what team we're playing? I'm like, Denver, of course. And I knew that after that comes the months in reverse. And I tell them, I'm like, you know, I say, I don't know, you know, I'm not the smartest guy. That's the thing I say, because I know I'm hurt. I know I got hit hard. So I know that I'm a forget certain things. So I start saying, I say, you know, I ain't the smartest guy in the book, you know. So I'm December, and I start rattling them off, and they start helping me, because essentially they kind of want you to play, you know. So some doctors are like, yeah, go on, keep going. And I'm like, that's not enough. I'm at June. That's not enough, you know. And what doctors do, they give you a list of 5 words, and then they give you a bunch of tests, and you know this. And they give you other tests like hand and eye coordination. They ask you to say days of the week, this and that. And then at the end of it, they ask you those words again. So as soon as they tell me these words, I'm saying those words, I'm failing all the other tests. I'm just repeating those words in my head. And I make sure at the end of it, I can give them at least 4 out of 5 of those words. And if I can give them 4 out of 5 of those words, even just 3, they're like, yeah, he remembered those words. He's good. And I remember my coach looking me dead in my eye, looking at me like, Cribs. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, no, he's done. I'm like, man, they cleared me. Because I'm thinking about my contract being cut in half. I'm thinking about being out there on the field for my team. I just got here. I have to still I have to prove to them that I still can do it. I'm not thinking about my health. I'm not thinking about 10 years from now. I'm not thinking about, you know, my memory. I'm thinking about the game. I'm thinking about the moment. I'm thinking about right then and there. I need to be on the field. And it's been times where, you know, I know the symptoms. You know, it's aggression. A lot of the guys, they like, hey, man, get away from me. I told you ain't nothing wrong with me, man. And they get, so I try to remain calm, even though I'm irritated. And I'm like, stop asking me these questions. So it gets to the point where, you know, and we talk about, you know, when is it a time where, you know, the coaches has to look at the player and say no. And the medical doctors, they look at a player and got to say no.
That's what I was going to get to, because the guys, you know, they're gladiators. They want to be out there. They're going to want to play. But doesn't it get to the point where, I'm sorry, Steve. No, now I'm getting taken it personal. Doesn't it get to a point where
she didn't want me to play? Any type of hit I took, she's like,
but doesn't it get to a point where, okay, he's not a doctor. He's a player. He's going to want to be out there on the field running up and down, you know. Right. Doesn't it get to a point where the doctor's like, dude, you were just out for 2 minutes. There's no way. I mean, you might be able to pass this test or whatever. You need to go have a seat, you know?
And the NFL has done a lot as of recently to make some changes to the game. And you know, they're doing some different things. And some people feel as though they're not doing enough, but they are doing what they can. And the education is coming slowly but surely. My question to you is, though, how do you feel when you watch your husband take a major hit and he's knocked out on the field?
I forget what game it was. Baltimore. We were watching on TV, and I just dropped to my knees, praying, crying. I was hysterical when I seen him take that hit. And they cut to commercial. And then you don't have anyone who you can call and say, hey, is he okay? You know, they don't come back with an update. Back when he was playing, they weren't getting back on the TV saying, you know, we spoke to the trainers and he's all right. So I'm sitting there for about 45 minutes in just pure agony, crying, the kids crying. we just seen the man of our house laid out on the ground, and he was laid out. I mean, they had the camera on him for a minute, so I don't know how much longer after that he was knocked out. But it just does something to you, and I get to a point where, with him, I'm like, is it worth it? I know you take care of us, you take care of many households, and he was blessed to do so. But is it worth it? And that's what I struggle with. It drives me crazy. I talk to him, and then he's not even sounding like himself, so I know something's wrong with him. He's all antsy, sound like he just got done doing an aerobics class or something, and you sit on the plane, and you can tell he's real fidgety, but then he's out there that following Sunday. And for you to say, 7 to 10 days to heal from a concussion, it just it didn't make any sense to me. And a part of me is like, who's at fault? Is he at fault because he wants to be out there, or the people who are giving the permission for him to go out there and play? Whose fault is it? Because now I'm just upset, I'm hurt, I don't like the emotions that it puts me through. But then you see him out there, and then the next Sunday, and it's like, is it worth it? I don't know. I guess that's a question I have to ask him. Is it worth it? Because you couldn't pay me enough. I'm not going. Nobody's going to hit me. Like, you can't do that. I quit. You can have the ball. Here you go. Take it. But
Josh, we have time for maybe a couple more questions, and then we'll throw it to the audience. How many documented concussions have you had?
Documented since college, about 4.
About 4.
About 4 documented.
And then walk us through briefly what it feels like to take that hit. Like you just took a hit, and you have a concussion, or you feel as though you can't remember anything. What does that feel like?
It feels like the height, the climax of being drunk. If anybody ever was in college and you got drunk enough to where the type of drinking to when you say, I'm never going to drink again. And I have to compare it with that, because your mindset at the time of the hit is completely unaware of what just happened. When I got hit unconscious in Baltimore, I came to, and I didn't know what happened. I'm like, what? And I knew, only reason I knew I got hit hard because I saw Michael Irvin on the field, like looking at me in a suit. And I'm like, what is he doing on the field? And I couldn't wrap that around my head. And then when I rose up a little bit, I saw everybody on the knee praying and like, oh, Lord, please help me. And I'm like, oh, they looking at me. Oh, it's me, And I had to look for visual cues to know that I was the one who got knocked out. I didn't know I got knocked out. And they were, the doctors were like, is your head okay? I felt fine. And I told them, I said, except for right here. And what happened was, when I was unconscious, I got kicked in the face. And I didn't know. My helmet flew off. And, if you ever look at concussions on YouTube or anything, you notice that the hands jolt. They jolt just like that. And it's like I don't know what that is. It's a brain. It's triggers. Reflex. But it kind of, my hands went like that and I was out. And my helmet came off, and, looking at it on tape, it's hard for me. It was hard for like a year. I can honestly say, like, for a year, I shied away from even looking at the footage. And I saw that, I got kicked in the face, and I'm like, oh, that's why my head was hurting right here. And the way the doctors explained it to me was that it was a reboot. Like, sometimes when you get knocked unconscious, it's better than, sometimes it's better than getting hit and not getting unconscious, and then you're just like groggy and you're feeling, because there's been times when I get hit, and I'm gonna end it with this, it's been times when I was running a Wildcat, and for the Browns, I would get hit so hard, I'll be saying like 4. It'd be like, and I'm trying to call the next play, and I'm shaking my head, and I can't see, and I'm like, okay, let me just wait till I can at least see 2 people, at once. Let me wait till I only see double vision. So I'm stalling, and the center looking at me like, good. I'm like, I'm good. I'm faking calling signals. They like, what? He calling signals? Audible? Because I don't call signals and audibles. In Wildcat, I just snap the ball and go and do the play. So I'm just calling dummy signals, and I'm trying to give myself time to at least see only 2 people and not just 1. I mean, well, not 3 or 4, because my head was ringing.
Dr. Pandil, the last question for me for you. You've decided to start your own practice, and specifically working with athletes and mental health. Listening to Josh, what does that do for you? Knowing, is that confirmation for you that you made the right decision?
Well, Yeah, I mean, it is provides some confirmation, but it's also unsettling, right? And to some extent, I feel like I've been desensitized because this story I've heard this story repeatedly over and over and over again. I mean, guys say they don't remember an entire half of a game. And that I think is the problem. If you have a concussion and you're out there and you can't remember what's happening and the likelihood you're going to get hit again is pretty high. And then, there's a whole host of other clinical problems that come along with that. So, yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that this problem exists, but I think that, having more resources and support and education, I think is really, if nothing else, if people sort of think about it and think twice before they go back in a game, or think, the coach thinks twice before sending somebody back in the game, or a trainer, or even a teammate saying, hey, look, you look off, you need to sit down. I think that's I think what this really, is about.
Wow. At this time, we're going to throw it to Dan, and I think we're going to take some questions from the audience.
Some very quick housekeeping here before we get to questions from the audience. We are enjoying, as you know, a panel conversation on concussions in youth, amateur, and professional sports featuring Josh Cribbs, former NFL return specialist and wide receiver, his wife Maria Cribbs, also an author of Not for Long, and Dr. Mayur Pandya, lead psychiatrist at ACE Sports Psychiatry. Steve Sanders is our moderator. We encourage you to organize your questions for the panel now and ask that your questions be brief and to the point. If you're joining us via our webcast and would like to tweet a question, or if you're here in the audience and too shy to stand up and ask it yourself, you can tweet it at the City Club. We welcome all of you here and those joining us via the web stream provided by our primary media partner, 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ PBS, 104.9 WCLV Idea Stream, or one of the many other radio stations across the region and country that carry City Club programs. Production and distribution and broadcast of City Club programs are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Be sure to join us Tuesday, January 26th, as we welcome Michael Brune. He's the executive director of the Sierra Club. We'll have a conversation on climate change and how clean energy is boosting our economy and transforming the country. For more information about any of our upcoming forums or any of our past forums, you can visit us online at cityclub.org. Our community partner for today's forum is the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. We thank you very much for your support. We also welcome guests at tables hosted by the Cleveland Clinic and United Healthcare. We thank you very much for joining us. Additionally, we welcome students to today's program from Brookside High School, Cleveland Montessori School, Notre Dame Cathedral Latin High School, and St. Martin de Porres High School. Student participation is made possible by the Mary Jane Spar and Charles E. Spar Charitable Trust. Could the students please stand to be recognized? It's good to have you all here, and we're counting on you to participate in the Q&A. And it's now time for the Q&A. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding our microphones today are Office Assistant Wesley Allen and Marketing and Outreach Fellow Faye Walker. Do we have our first question?
Oh, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad that the City Club is covering this topic because it is so important. I taught school for many years, and one incident that I'll always remember is I had a young man who was really misbehaving and was not in the mood to do his work, and I asked him what was wrong, and he said he was angry because his mom wouldn't let him play football because she was afraid that he would get injured. And so, Ms. Gibbs, I'm asking you, pretend you're in a parent meeting and you have about 20 parents who are staring at you and they want to know how you can advise them on if their children, their sons or whatever, should play football. And I'm just wondering, what would you say to them?
What would I say to them? Like I said earlier, the parent in me wants to stop my child from wanting to play any contact sports, but then, like I said, I don't want to take his dream and his passion away from him. So what I would say, my son, he's pretty tough. I've seen tougher kids, but he's pretty tough. You know, if your son is, because sometimes it can be the parent forcing the child to play. That's why I asked you, did you sign your son up or did he want to? And you have to realize whether it's the parent. If the parent is forcing a child to play, I don't agree with that. But if a child is kind of just drawn towards a sport, I would say start off with a safer alternative, like, they could do flag or, swimming. Expose them to everything else that you can. And if they're still passionate about doing one particular thing, let them try it. They might not like it. You can let them try it, and they might not get injured. They might walk away with no concussion. We don't know that. But I would just say, just look at your child, determine whether you think he has it, or, this is something that's just maybe he's going to just fly off, or he should probably, What I will say is this, like I said earlier, I just don't want to start living in fear. Like, in reality, these kids need to get off their iPads and their cell phones and be more active. So I never want to stop a child from being active, but I would reach for a safer alternative. But if he just keeps drawing towards it, you might just want to give him a chance and let him try.
Just wanted to ask the doctor if this new awareness is worldwide. What about these guys who are playing soccer and knocking it with their head? Are they monitored carefully?
Well, most of my experience is with football and football largely. But I think the education is, or the awareness is, promoted worldwide. I think we hear most about it because of the NFL and the power of the NFL, and I think they want to make sure that people know that they are listening. But concussions in other sports are just as bad. Soccer is soccer, hockey, lacrosse, swimming, skiing. I mean, there are a lot of sports that this applies to. That's another thing about, I think, the movie. The movie could have done something to at least mention that this is not just a football conversation. This is a contact, all contact sports. I think this is applicable to.
And to add to that, it's not just concussions, it's head trauma in general. Because you have some guys, the NFL puts out the information of how many concussions and who leads those concussions. Cornerbacks this past season, had 41 concussions, and they led the amount of concussions. Wide receivers were 24, and these are the fastest guys on the field. But what about the linemen who constantly, every single play, bang, bang, and little by little, bang, those little bangs over a course of a career, 12, 14 years, you start to see the issues that these guys live with. And I thought that was one thing that the movie did a great job of, was showing the lives of the athletes. And oftentimes you don't get to see behind the scenes. You see what goes on in the field. We root and we cheer as fans of the game, but you don't see what happens when they go home and they're with their family.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, intuitively, I think that makes a lot of sense, but I also think that connection still needs to be made, right? Scientifically, it's easy to make that leap, right? I mean, if you hit your head a whole bunch of times and you see all these spots on the brain that shouldn't be there, then it's going to lead to all kinds of other problems down the road. But how come there are guys out there who don't have problems, and guys that have very successful post, playing careers?
Yeah.
So I think that's where I think the science needs to provide, some has to ground this conversation, and that just takes time and effort. And
yeah, that's good.
Having watched Cleveland football since the 1940s, or even the 30s, I'm very confused about one thing. I realize that today the players are much bigger and they're faster, and so the hits are harder. But if you go back to the 40s, they weren't exactly easy. I mean, if you watch some of the movies then. And in those days, the offensive linemen were not allowed to take their arms away from their chest. They couldn't even be out like this. And defensive linemen used head slaps. And this wasn't a few times a game like when you get hit now. This was every play. And they used to cup their hands like this and hit right over the ear. And they used to say, we're trying to ring their bell. And plenty of offensive linemen who played in those days will tell you that they got their bells rung constantly during the games. And yet, I don't know of one of those offensive linemen that played for years for the Browns that had any, more than normal troubles as they got older. and I knew most of them in those days. And that confuses me because they used to get hit, strictly the offensive linemen, forget the others. The offensive lineman got hit every play by a head slap. And that must have been, 40, 50 times a game. And yet, most of them lived pretty normal lives later and didn't have major problems. How do you explain that?
I think from the study or the published material of Dr. Bennett Amalu, who published CTE, one thing that he stated is that no one ever looked previously to him. You know, no one was looking for this disease. So they didn't know if someone had an issue, they called it dementia. You know, but then once you really looked into the brain, you can see that these symptoms were not dementia. And within the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, you wouldn't know. But basically, and without telling you the movie, he looked deeper into the issue. So maybe it's a situation where, with the new technology and more recent studies, the information now is presented in a form of where we're able to find things that we weren't looking for in the past.
Well, I've seen the movie. But I've seen the movie. But what I'm saying is, if you look at all the people that played offensive line for the Browns back in the 40s and the 50s, some of them were Hall of Famers and many of them were great guys. I don't know of any of them that had major problems like you're talking about as they grew older, and many of them have grown older, and some of them are in their 80s today.
But is a head slap the same as a full-on
Well,
hit? Is that
it rings the bell, and that gives you a concussion.
I think it's a difference.
That's the difference.
It's a difference in everybody, because everybody who get hit hard don't necessarily have a concussion or don't necessarily show the signs. But it just takes a couple of us, who are susceptible to getting hit and getting affected. Maybe they don't make them, that old saying, they don't make them like they used to. And that's seriously, it's,
I just want to add something. So I think, it goes to the point that I think it's not like everybody who plays football or everybody who has a concussion is going to lead to some disastrous consequence decades later. I think there are risk factors and variables that we don't completely, we have a sense of the things that lead, the normal population to develop dementia and those kinds of things. But, there's a selection bias that occurs, right? So if the Lawrence Phillips thing is the most, I guess, timely thing. Like if somebody had concussions in the past or played contact sports and now they have behavioral problem, we're like, okay, well, we're going to open up his brain after he dies and we're going to look and see if he has this examination that's consistent with CTE. I guarantee Lawrence Phillips will probably have the examinations consistent, but does that mean that all of his behaviors and all of his things that happened, and the murders and those kinds of things all are because he had played football and had concussions? I don't agree with that. I mean, that's where I think research and prospective, longer term kinds of studies are essential. And I think there was some news recently about the NIH and how they wanted to fund with the NFL the study, and now there's all kinds of problems with the funding because the NFL wants to kind of also be a participant in how that study is designed and who's controlling it and so forth. And so until you get that's where that's questions like this are going to always come up.
Faye, do we have a question here? Go ahead.
I have 3 children that played all collegiate athletes and played through high school as well. And I know we have some high school athletes here. All 3 of them happened to get concussed while they were playing in college. One of them happened to be at your old alma mater, Josh, at Kent State. But anyway, they all got baseline tested. And that was part of their return to play protocol. And I know 2 out of 3 pretty much told me, Dad, I just memorized the test and gave them the answers, or I didn't do as well as I should have on the first test, and they allowed me to get back to play a lot sooner. Don't know how prolific that is, or I'd like to hear your experience on if you had to get baseline tested, how valid do you think that is, or if you think that is something that's important moving forward, or if there's any rooms for improvement in that?
Definitely. I was baseline tested. We're baseline tested every year. And you take your baseline so that when you do have a concussion or you do have an issue, they can compare it to when you're okay. I don't know if I should.
Players cheat.
Players cheat on that end. I've done it. And I remember I've tried to cheat my baseline, and my trainer said, Josh, you're smarter than that. Get back in there and take it again. I'm like, ah. So I go in there and I do just enough so that when I do have a concussion, because it's going to happen, I'm going to get hit hard sooner or later. And they're going to ask me to, we know you're not going to have a concussion. We have to put you in the protocol. I will do good enough, even if I have a concussion, to still be, okay, his baseline was right here. So we have seen that players do that all across the NFL, all across college sports and high school, because they want to stay out there on the field. And that's most important. We live in a moment, and I would like more rigorous examinations, more than a baseline, more study to that, to not allow people like players like me or players that really love the game. Sometimes you have to protect the player from themselves. And as much as I love the sport, you have to do that.
Dr. Pena, referring to this protocol, with your experience, are there any changes in it that you would recommend to the NFL?
Well, it's probably a group of people behind you that probably have more experience with this. But I don't do the sideline testing. I think that the sideline testing, by the team doctors and the neurologists, I think are the best that they can be at this point in time, because you have to have an instrument that can screen somebody quickly, get the information, and then make a decision. But no tool in and of itself is going to can stand alone. I mean, there's a lot of variables. When some of the things Josh talked about, kind of skirting around, like, hey, look at the Jumbotron, and then figuring it out. I mean, there are just elements of that you can't always account for. I think there are a lot of groups of people, a lot of societies, academics or medical societies, leagues that are looking at how do we do the best we can. And I think education of everybody is really the place that's easiest to start. And I think that's what's starting, or not starting, but has been done, but needs to continue. There's also, I think, technology in terms of quickly assessing things accurately via apps or better equipment, or measuring how much of a hit somebody takes. But again, what is that threshold that's going to lead to CTE, or is it going to lead to CTE? We don't know those things yet, and that's where a lot of these questions really lie.
Steve, I was happy to hear you bring up the Antoine Randall story. In that story, he says football could be dead in 20 to 25 years. He's currently exhibiting his own memory problems. If any of the four of you up there had the ear of the commissioner, what would you suggest in terms of, obviously the first step is to somehow limit concussions, and that's a tall order. Would you say put more money into the study of the science of helmets? Would you say rule changes are needed? What would you say?
It's a great question.
I feel they're doing a lot to try to make the league safer. But at the same time, to open it up to not just trying to control the study, but doing whatever they need to do to have the research funded, doing whatever they need to do for the safety of the athlete as opposed to the entertainment of the game. Caring more about the athletes beyond the field, beyond the entertainment, beyond the money, and really showing. I think if they reverse the friction that is trying to, cover it up or say that it's not a lot of research, and just do whatever they can possibly, because this sport will survive. It's America's sport to me. It's a great sport. Yeah. Just do whatever they can physically possible to make sure that the research is done and the safety is done to make sure that they can play, with limitation of concussions.
The Cleveland Clinic is doing a study currently, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little?
I think The trust.
Dr. Pandya? Or?
Yeah. Well, you can talk through your experience, I guess.
Well, I just recently kind of enrolled in it unofficially, and it's basically I'm taking. They have high tech machines, and we was talking about it earlier, like a HD, a powerful magnet MRI that can see deeper into the brain. That can tip off warning signs of things. Heart monitors. I'm actually supposed to be hooked to a heart monitor now so that they can monitor my heart, the rhythm of it, echo scans, stress tests, get on a treadmill and run, and they monitor your heart and they monitor your brain. So it's all of these tests that's being taken place for players that's coming out of the NFL and who've taken a lot of hits, that they can start to catch things early on. And that's something that's great that the NFL has funded, that's providing security and confidence within a lot of the families of people who've taken a lot of hits.
So Cleveland Clinic is funding this, or is it the NFL?
NFL.
To answer his question.
Both.
So they are doing, okay.
How you doing? I'm a performance coach, and I see these kids every day coming to train with me, and they're very, very passionate. So the sport is not going to die anytime soon. They really want to get out to do it, but it's about a risk-reward. Is the risk worth the reward? And obviously they think so. So my question is, have they started to use something that's going to help people after it happens? Because it's going to happen. So we need to look at something that's going to help them after it happens, because people are going to lie on the test. They're going to do what they got. They're going to find a way around it. They're going to do it. They're going to play because they look at the risk and the reward. And they see, like you said, $1 million contract. I want to get out there and play. I'm 44 years old. So the question is, like, again, are they doing something to help them after it happens to have them live a more comfortable lifestyle?
Yeah, and I'll take a stab at it. You see something like Antonio Brown, the best receiver in the NFL this past season, and he took a hit towards the end of the game in a playoff game. And I'm sure Antonio Brown wanted to be out on the field playing the next week, getting the Pittsburgh Steelers ready to go to a Super Bowl or make a Super Bowl run, but they held him out. So I think that the league is starting to take, especially speaking from a NFL professional level, I think the league is starting to take that power away from the players, regardless of the status of that player.
They're definitely making a lot of changes. When I first entered the NFL, I took a hard hit. How many fingers am I holding up? And now it's more rigorous. They're definitely taking a lot of steps. Every athlete, college, high school, they know that it's 100% injury. It's 100%. It's not if, it's when. You're going to get some type of injury, some type of trauma in the game of football. It's expected. And I think the NFL has come a long way in trying to protect their players and such.
Absolutely. Do we have a question here? Or? Okay. Oh, sorry.
So, question about the path forward. I think of awareness, I think of advocacy, I think of funding. The movie, this great panel here today, brings awareness. The path forward, can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, I look around the room, you've got congressional representation, you've got elite medical representation, you've got business community representation, future athletes, the Cleveland Browns, a lot of community leaders here wondering what the path forward is. So can you speak to the vision of what this looks like to maybe get the funding that's needed or to get the proper legislation that's done so that we as a community can play a leading role in bringing solutions to this issue?
I'll just say just one quick piece. For high school sports, there are better helmets out there that they should be wearing. I know I partner with Zenith and Dan Gilbert, he owns a part of that. A lot of the high school sports don't have a certain regulation and recreation as well of certain helmets that they can't, the helmets are graded. They have a certain grade, and a lot of them don't have regulations on those graded helmets. And so the funding behind that, so one school might have a football team with great helmets and another in a more urban area doesn't. So they're more susceptible, or it's not required. Maybe they have the funding, but it's not required that everyone wear this A+ rated helmet, that the chances of getting concussion in this helmet are decreased. So that's what you have to look at, the equipment that they're using, and then the coaching. It has to be coached from the smallest level on up. The coaching just can't always be guys that just have time on their hands that be able to coach without any instruction, without any workshops. There have to be players to be coached. So the funding will have to go to the equipment, the regulations of that equipment, making sure that it's up to par, and then the coaching behind it has to be reinforced.
Yeah, and tell them a little bit about the Elite Football League. I mean, you're going above and beyond, and Josh is very modest, but you're doing something that's completely out of the box for a professional athlete.
Definitely. I love contact football, it's no doubt. But the concerns of my wife, even my concerns, I'm scared for my own son. So it's that dilemma. I'm like, I want him to follow my footsteps, but do I really? So I started the Elite Flag Football League with Steve and myself. And it's a flag football league at the multiplex in Warrensville Heights at the Word Church. And, you know, they have a lot of football fields. And I kind of want to be able, and the ages is from 6 to 11. And that's a crucial age group before they get, that's where they get the psyche that, oh, it's cool to play football. It's cool to hit. We want to teach otherwise. It's cool to catch the ball and run for a touchdown. Avoid the hits. Avoid the hits. More fundamentals. Tackle around the waist. Shoulder pad hits. And less on the helmet. So starting this flag football is instrumental because it puts in them, you know, the more professional athletes that, you know, get behind it, you know, you're teaching these fundamentals to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds early. So then by the time they do start contact football, it's already ingrained to them the fundamentals and the safety behind playing the sport.
Do we have, Mike Rosen, Cleveland Clinic, do we have enough data that says if you recover from a concussion, you're unlikely to develop this? If you have 4 concussions in an 8-year period, you're more likely. Where is the data and how are we going to get that?
So, no, we don't have that data. We don't know what, you know, how much of a hit, how many hits, what type of hits will lead to long-term problems, right? And so I think this is, this is where I think the science, I think there are a lot of people doing a lot of really good work, including the Cleveland Clinic and, you know, UNC, and there's a lot of places that are really studying this and trying to find this out. But, you know, I at some point want to engage Jeremy real quick because I think we've gotten all the way down from, you know, we were at A and B and C and now we're at Z, or, you know, talking about dementia and all these things, which can occur, but there's a lot of stuff in between. And I want to get a sense of, you know, I think media sometimes intensifies a topic. I mean, it does a great job of education and awareness, but sometimes there can be a very strong bias that makes people very afraid of what's happening, right? I mean, in my practice, mental illness and violence, I mean, for a long time, and still I think a lot of people believe that mentally ill people are very violent and schizophrenia is very violent, but that's portrayed in the media and TV and movies, and that's why people believe that. So, you know, every time someone studies a brain of somebody who just got CTE, this all kind of comes up again, but no one talks about the science not being there, and I think that's really where we need to be.
So if you're going to advise Maria about her son or about any other kids that she's talking to, we just don't have the data to tell her.
Yeah, I mean, I think as like any physician, I think we make the best individual decision, right, based on biology, the size of the person, the position they want to play, the sport they want to play, comorbid conditions, you know, lifestyle, diet. We take all of that into consideration anytime we make an opinion. I think it has to be individualized. It'd be hard for Maria to tell 20 parents, like, yes, you should all play football or you should not play football. I think it's really individual.
All right. We have to wrap it there. Can we get a round of applause, please? Steve Sanders, Josh Cribbs, Maria Cribbs, Mayer Pena. And today at the City Club, we've been enjoying a panel conversation on concussions in sport. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Our forum is now adjourned.